Hello, everyone. I was going to have a synchronous session, but decided that it might be easier for me just to record some thoughts on power and influence for you to listen to at your leisure. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll get this out to you. Power, important to think about. In an organization, the difference between someone who can get an idea off the ground and accepted and someone who can't um, often isn't who has the better idea. Often it's a question of competence or political competence. And this Saturday, when we get to class, we'll be talking about this notion of manager as politician. So it's important to think about this and what it means. And usually, when we think about politics, we're thinking about power. It's a critical element of management, use of power. And the real deal is if you're an effective leader, people who work with and for you are going to feel powerful. In other words, you use your power to help others accomplish exceptional things. It's difficult to do the truly excellent, exceptional things without political clout. So it's really important that you understand power for yourself and understand how to gain it. There's a lot of negativity associated with the concept of power. If I say to you, I think you're a real power-oriented person, you don't quite think of that in a positive way. I tend to think of it as a neutral word, neither positive or negative, that can have either debilitating effects or help accomplish wonderful things. In many ways, power can be viewed as a sign of your personal efficacy or competence. And people with power shape environments. They really help mold the environment they're in. However, if you're powerless, you're really controlled by others or molded by others' environment. So, people, if you gain power, you can intercede for people. You can help people move. You get approval on things for your budget. You're at a meeting, your agenda items are heard. Sometimes you get real fast decisions. So there's a lot to be said for having power. And so there's a big relationship between your competency, your effectiveness. There is a big relationship between that and power. But both the lack of power and abuse of power are very counterproductive and debilitating. So when we think of the negative aspects of power, we're really thinking of the abuse of power. And really the abuse of power has to do with really creating pawns of other people. You're out for your own gain, not the gain of the greater good. So basically, in an empowering situation, you're trying to use your power to gain high levels of effectiveness. Here's almost an interesting graphical way to look at it. on the one scale is ineffective and effective and personal power. And kind of you're trying to hit the sweet spot where you have sufficient power to be empowered and to operate effectively, but not too much that it tends toward abuse. So if you have a need for power and your need for power is strong, you're on that fine line between abuse of it and use of it in constructive ways. So in a sense, in the past, we've looked at traditional definitions of power in terms of having authority over others or being able to get others to do as you say. My view, I think a good way of thinking of power is the ability to get things done. And the implication is not that we have to avoid power, but we need to learn how to use it wisely. I mean, you see so many examples of people who haven't used power wisely and what it's done for them in the long run. In terms of for yourself, two takeaways from this are important to think about. How do you gain power, or how do you overcome feelings of powerlessness? And then how do you convert the power that you have into ways that are useful and effective, and also ways that abuse power? There's some of the resources posted for this week. A couple of the PowerPoints. Jim Smither, I borrowed from Jim Smither. He put together some pretty long information on even more specifics on this. A couple good articles to look at. So I encourage you to go through some of the, in addition to the book, some of the resources put up on the module. So your sources of power come from who you are, some of your personal characteristics, and also where you are in an organization. Let me just talk about who you are. Some of your personal characteristics, or how much knowledge and experience do you have? How much expertise? This is one of the reasons we give consultants power over us. They're experts, and we recognize that and give people power because of it. We also tend to give very likable people power. People who are charismatic. People who have agreeable behavior. Even people with attractive physical characteristics. All around personal attraction. And remember when you did the NEO, one of the characteristics looked at was agreeableness. Another one is effort. How hard do you work? And how many times do you see this touted as a real positive? I work really hard. I put a lot of time into it. So we tend to give people like that influence. And then, people who seem to live the values of the organization. People who demonstrate their commitment and loyalty, etc. We tend to give them power. Almost a legitimacy to what they do. So these are some of the things to think about for yourself in terms of how you can gain some power. Work hard, be likable, and increase your expertise. Another is, again, the positional view of power is where you are in an organization. So one of them is, how central are you in the communication network? How much information do you have? Are people, are you in the information flow? Do you know what's going on? Do you have access to information? You maybe have heard the expression, knowledge is power, or having information is power. It's very important if you're trying to give power to others. That's why communication is so important, because we're giving others information. Just think how you feel if you know there's information out there that you don't have access to. It doesn't make you feel real comfortable in your situation. So getting and giving information is very important in setting up power. That's why the CIO position, your Chief Information Officer in organizations, for a number of reasons, that's why that person reports to a president or a CEO, because everyone needs that information. How much flexibility do you have? How much discretion do you have in your workday? Again, that's a source of power. Are you in a position where you can move pretty freely? How visible are you? Is what you do seen by others? Hey, maybe in your company, you might want to volunteer to oversee the United Fund program. That gives you visibility. What are things you can do that can get you throughout the organization? And then how relevant is the work you do? Are you part of the core competence of an organization? In all of these areas of where you are, they're important questions to ask yourself, but also you can build the power of others by making them visible, giving them relevant or meaningful work, granting them access to information. So this has implications not only for you, but people you might be leading or managing. And so the next part of what we get into is influence and strategies on how we influence. So this gets to your use of power and the different ways that you can use your power. Excuse me. So the first thing is, how do you gain it, and then how do you use it? One of the ways we think about using power is what we call retribution. And that's when you force other people to do what you want. So a more direct approach here would be to coerce people or to threaten people. An indirect approach here might be through intimidation or pressure. So you're like, hey, I have a lot of power here, and if you don't do what I want, you might not get that budget. So you're trying to really intimidate. You might gather a coalition group to kind of threaten others. So that's one way people try and influence. It's not really a very, doesn't have long-term effect. People might do what you want, but you tend to build a lot of resentment. Another really common one is reciprocity. You make exchanges. Basically, if you do what I want, I'll give you what you want. Basically, you're doing a bargaining approach, a compromising approach. Indirectly, we play on people's, hey, you remember all the favors I did for you in the past? Or, just by keeping you on in this job, you're kind of obliged to help me out. So there's that kind of a reciprocity. And then the last big influence strategy is reason. We show others that it makes sense to go along. I mean, the direct approach is you present the facts of the case and say, hey, this is reasonable and rational. I think this is the approach we find most today in organizations. The indirect approach is we appeal to people's values and goals. Say, hey, come on, for the good of the organization, we got to get this done. That's more of an indirect. So some of the tactics we use are pressure, exchanges, rationality, building coalitions with other groups, appealing to emotions, impression management, convincing another of worth, use of organizational rewards and recognitions. Sometimes we avoid as one way to influence or not influence. So when we look at the power model for you to think about, and you're analyzing power for yourself, start here. Where do you get your power? Where are you in these four areas? And then where are you in these four areas in terms of position power? And then think about how you appropriately influence other people. What are your strategies that you use? So this is a way to take the information here and apply it for yourselves. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say on this. So on power, I think we'll be thinking about this as we talk about when we get to the chapter on conflict management, and we'll do some more on negotiation. So that's it for now. Let me sign off, and I'll see you in class this Saturday. Thank you.